Hey everybody, welcome back to Checkerboard Chat, the official sports podcast of the Daily Beacon. I'm Tyler Wobbles and that's DeMichael Cole, and we're back here bringing you some more discussions and debates about Tennessee athletics. DeMichael, I have one word for you, basketball. There's been a lot of basketball on this campus, a lot of basketball in Tennessee and in the state of Tennessee, actually in Nashville with the women's basketball tournament. So we're going to break all that down with both the men's team and the women's team. The men's team is gearing up for the SEC tournament after closing its season with pretty remarkable win, a pretty remarkable accomplishment. DeMichael, just take me into that. You were there covering the game, so what was the atmosphere like, and just what do you think that win was like for the Vols?
Well, just the atmosphere in general. I'll say that atmosphere was the second best one of the season, ahead of the Kentucky game. So, Kentucky game is the one that gets all the buzz. But this year, you had the December game against North Carolina, they checkered Thompson Bowler Arena. And that game probably was the loudest, just overall. But this game against Georgia it was crazy. The fans were into it. Admiral Schofield had a steal at one point, and he ran down the baseline and dunked it, and that probably was the loudest Thompson Bowling Arena has been all season. So that game was crazy. It was senior night for James Daniel, and they clinched a share of the SEC championship first time since 2008. That was big for those players. It was big for Rick Barnes. It was good to, in the locker room they celebrated. They threw the water on Rick Barnes, and he changed outfits for the post-game presser because, they soaked him up.
They did, yep.
But they're rolling right now, and you ended the season with a big win, not to mention, they had a 5-game losing streak against Georgia. So there were so many reasons that game meant so much more to this team, and now they're just gearing up for the SEC tournament, which will be very competitive.
And talking about that SEC tournament, DeMichael, just how do you see the Vols faring? Obviously, this is an SEC that's been really up and down this season. Obviously, we know what Kentucky, they weren't the same that they normally are. Auburn and Tennessee, both were sort of the top dogs, obviously, with sharing the SEC championship. So what would be your preview of this SEC tournament? How do you think the Vols might fare, and how far do you think could they get? How much of a run do you think could they have in this tournament?
Well, for this tournament, fans, everyone, just prepare for anything. It's really that simple, and that's not normal. Usually, you have at the top, you have a team that that's going to be there, but any team, Rick Barnes said it earlier. He said it around mid-February, Rick Barnes said something like Georgia was around 11th or 12th at the time in the SEC. He said Georgia could win the SEC tournament, and nobody would be shocked. So, that's just that puts this in perspective how, evenly competitive this field will be. You look at teams like Texas A&M, who were in the top 5 at the beginning of the season at a certain point, and they fell off a little bit lately, but they've had pretty good moments this season. You look at a team like Kentucky, same thing. They've had good moments. They fell off at times. You look at a team like Florida. So this is a very competitive, very deep field, and at any moment, any of these teams can get hot and give Auburn a very good run, give Tennessee a very good run. Auburn is battling injuries, and, they squeaked past South Carolina in their regular season finale. So Auburn may not be the same Auburn team that a lot of people saw in the regular season. So they're definitely on the upset watch. Tennessee, I feel like Tennessee could win this tournament, but it'll be very hard simply because they'll play the winner of Mississippi State and LSU in that Friday matchup, and with those two teams, Tennessee fared well against both of them. Tennessee went to Mississippi State and won that game by double digits behind Admiral Schofield's big day, and Grant Williams didn't even have a big game, and they still pretty much handled Mississippi State. Same thing against LSU. They played LSU at home. They shut down the point guard, Tremont Waters, who, was filling it up at the time. And, those two opponents, you feel like Tennessee, they could get past those two. But after that, it's like they could possibly run into Kentucky. They could possibly run into Florida. And these are teams, that they beat in the regular season. But, as we saw with Lady Vols a little bit, every now and then when you have to play a team over and over, they learn more about you, and they get that much more harder to beat. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so, DeMichael, this question would have popped in my mind. I was going to ask you, obviously, after covering this season, obviously, Rick Barnes has been on the job for several years now. You've seen him sort of develop this team into a winning program now. And obviously, a lot of people are on his side. A lot of people are really happy to have him as their coach. The success of this season, do you think that's more due to Rick Barnes' skills in coaching and maybe in recruiting and just developing a program? Or do you think it's more due to the success of certain players on the court? Just who do you think more should get that credit, or is it just an overall effort?
Well, it's an overall effort, but if you're going to give the credit to someone, you got to give it to Rick Barnes. I mean, you look at these guys, these aren't 5-star recruits. These aren't highly rated 4-star recruits that all, the Power 5 teams were begging for. These are, players that were going to take time to develop and to turn into what they've turned into. I mean, a guy like Admiral Schofield, who's, been playing some of the best ball in the SEC of late, and Grant Williams he'll probably be first team All-SEC. If he's not, he'll be second team. So Grant Williams had a remarkable year. And neither of these guys were, just highly recruited.
Sure.
So, you got to give it to Rick Barnes. And he's installed a mindset in his team, and they've all bought in. And the perfect example of that is James Daniel. James Daniel came to this team. We all knew he was one of the top scorers in the NCAA. I believe he was the active leading scorer entering the season. In the entire NCAA, he averaged over 25, 26 points a game at Howard in his last season there. And, James Daniel could fill the ball up, but he came here. He bought into what Rick Barnes told him. Rick Barnes told him, he said, you're not going to be a 25-point-per-game scorer here. That's not what we need you to do. We need you to play defense first and buy into this team mindset, and that's what he's done. And that's a perfect example of that. So James Daniel is only averaging 7 points now. That's like 20 points less than what he was averaging at Howard in his last season. But they've all bought in. And when you buy in to what your coach is saying, the way that Tennessee has, usually good things happen. And there are no egos on this team. There are no, no, I want the shot type mentality. Everyone, we've seen it. Lamonte Turner's hit the big shot. Admiral Schofield hit the big shot in the last game, and Grant Williams has made a lot of go-to shots this season. That's the guy they usually go to the most. But, as I said, a lot of these players have had their moments this season, and that's the Tennessee way that Barnes has brought here.
For sure, and I think that's really interesting looking at, the Rick Barnes situation right now. That's almost, when you're a university and you hire a coach, really at any sport, that's what you want. You have a coach come in his first few seasons, you see a little bit of that slow improvement, building up your roster. And then you have a season like this year where you really just explode, just have that season where, you do what the fans want, you win those games, you co-win the SEC.
Yeah, he's a tough coach.
Sure.
And I think that plays a role in it too. Barnes isn't the, it's going to be okay, you can do it next time type coach.
Yeah.
He said it in his last presser that, Admiral Schofield and Grant Williams are the hardest two working guys, as far as getting in the gym, putting in time in the gym. But Admiral was over there to the side, and I think after that he said something like he doesn't tell them that because, he doesn't want them thinking that. He wants them thinking they always can do more. And that's been the mentality this whole season. Every time Tennessee's picked up a big win, whether it was beating Kentucky twice or, the big win over Purdue, in any of those games, they always say, we can do more, we can do more. Winning the, SEC regular season championship, Admiral Schofield said, we're not done yet, we can do more. So, it's Barnes. He's so tough on them to the point it's in the team now that they feel like they're not finished, and there's always room for more improvement. And when you got a coach like that, you can't ask for more than that.
For sure, and I think that it will be very interesting to see where Tennessee goes, and obviously in the tournament, and then in the NCAA, but after this season. Rick Barnes really seems to have the program where he wants it right now. He's getting the guys bought into his system. You finally see those benefits of having that system, of, recruiting well, of, teaching players the way he wants to teach them. And he's a guy that's had success. He's had success, in different stops in his career. Obviously, the administrators at Tennessee were hoping that he would have it here, and
Yeah.
I would say that Philip Fulmer and, everyone else in the administration is, pretty happy to see him, and they'd probably like to keep him around for a long time.
Definitely, yeah.
For sure. So now we're going to switch gears here a little bit, and we're going to talk about some Lady Vols basketball. Obviously, the women's team traveled to Bridgestone Arena in Nashville in the SEC tournament, and they had a 2-game run. Obviously, they played Auburn, who was the 10 seed, while Tennessee was the 7 seed in the second round. They had a first-round bye, and Tennessee defeated Auburn. They moved on to the quarterfinals, where they played South Carolina, which that was a matchup that DeMichael and I talked about a lot. That was Tennessee had already beat South Carolina 2 times in the regular season, but there was a little bit of an asterisk right there.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have arguably the nation's best player, Aja Wilson. She had 2 different ailments that sidelined her for those games. And there was a lot of, talk going up into this game, DeMichael, about would she play. And not just with her, but also with, Jamie Nard. Obviously, Nard has been, arguably Tennessee's best player this season, has been a standout senior for the team. But then she took a hard fall against Auburn, and, she suffered what was reported as a bruised hip. And a lot of people weren't sure if she would play. She ended up starting. Aja Wilson did not start, but she did come in about halfway through the first quarter. And I think that was about all she wrote.
Yeah.
Obviously Tennessee did give them a good game. They did come back, some in the third quarter to just make it within, I think, 3 points. But South Carolina ended up with the win and put Tennessee out for the SEC tournament, ended their run in the quarterfinals. So basically, DeMichael, after looking at this Lady Vols team, seeing what they did, obviously, now they're awaiting this NCAA tournament where they're going to find out what their selection is.
Yeah.
It appears like they will host unless something changes. The last rankings that were released, they were number 12 out of the 16 teams that would get to host. So, DeMichael, just what stage do you see this Lady Vols team at right now? Do you think they're ready to make a run in the NCAA tournament, or do you think that may not be in the cards for them right now?
Well, I've said for a long time now, this team, of course, every team goes as far as your leaders take you, but this team won't reach their full potential until all 3 of those freshmen are playing, their best basketball of the season. And we saw with Renaya Davis.
Yeah, Renaya Davis.
She had a very big game against Auburn.
Yeah. Hit the game-winning shot.
Yeah. And what did she have? Around 18 points or so?
Yeah, it was somewhere around there.
Yeah, but she had a real big game. So, she was playing well. And now, you see it in moments with the other 2 freshmen. So will they be very consistent? And you get that consistency from Russell and Nard. And you add those players, playing well, peaking at the same time all together, then you have a team that can make a really deep run in the NCAA tourney. And whether they're seeded 3 or 4 is going to be a big thing too, because obviously, that's a big difference. As a 3 seed, you're probably going to, face a team that's a little more evenly matched with you, like a 2 seed, if they, get to that Sweet 16 range. But, there's some pretty good 1 seeds this year.
For sure, yeah.
So if Tennessee is seeded 4th, they'll have a very tough Sweet 16 matchup. And if they, get to the Sweet 16, even before the Sweet 16, you'll have a tough matchup against a 5 seed who's probably ranked usually in the 20s in the AP poll. So whether they're seeded will be a big thing. But this team, I don't feel like they'll be able to reach their full potential until all 3 of those freshmen are maximizing their potential. And we've seen it in spurts, but now fans and everyone need to see it happen together. And if they can get that with the 2 senior leaders playing well, the sky is the limit, and they can make a deep run.
For sure, and I agree with you on that. I think that this team could make a very deep tournament run. Obviously, it does, like we said before, it does look like they will host the first 2 rounds of the tournament in their regional, which would be a huge boost. I mean, we know, obviously,
especially young players.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a home court advantage. That's a place they've had success playing. They've lost very few games at home this year. I think just around 2. And then obviously you saw what the men's team did against when they played that game against Georgia, when they just, it was electric. It was a sold-out game.
Yeah.
And I think if the Lady Vols, had that same fan support at their games in the first 2 rounds of the tournament, that could definitely be a difference maker.
Right.
And also I think it is important to note, this is a really good Tennessee team. They have had their struggles. They have lost, losing to unranked Alabama. they did have that. They went 15-0 at the start of the season.
They've won some big games.
Sure, yeah, and they did fall off a little bit, but this is a very good Lady Vols team.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the best seasons for women's college basketball in terms of really good teams.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you saw, South Carolina, Mississippi State in the finals of the SEC tournament.
Yeah.
Those are very good teams. And, South Carolina did not have A.J. Wilson for those first 2 games, but, Tennessee did win those games pretty handedly. So I think that sometimes in all that fanfare with the men's team, that can get lost a little bit. And obviously, sure, the men's team should get that praise. You see what Rick Barnes has done. Fans have that admiration for him. But this women's team is good.
Yeah, I think it's the expectation level.
For sure.
Expectations are set based off of the past.
Yeah.
And, for, whatever reason, we all know why the Lady Vols are, expected to finish top 10, top 5, really, every season. And, for other reasons, we know why a lot of fans didn't expect the men's basketball team to even make the tournament this season.
That's true, yeah.
So it's the expectation
how many times
level.
have we heard that picked 13th in the SEC?
Yeah.
How many? I think I saw that about 1,000 times on Twitter after that game. But
even the players are starting to chime in about it. But, it's the expectation level I think plays a huge role in that, simply because, the Lady Vols, they're right around, where they were projected to be.
Mm-hmm.
But, from the fans' perspective, Pat Summitt, she set the standard so high. And, when you have to follow up someone like that, it's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
And it's impossible pretty much. So, Holly Warwick has done a really good job, but she's in that position where she'll always be held to that standard.
Mm-hmm.
So, that plays a role into it because fans have been spoiled with this
definitely.
Lady Vols team.
Absolutely.
And with the men's team, they haven't been spoiled. 2013 was the last time that the men's team made the tournament, and, they're locked for the tournament now. So they're about to go into the NCAA tournament, a potential top 4 seed. Depending on how far they go, they could get up to a 2 seed potentially. So right now, looking at anywhere between a 2 to a 5 seed. And fans haven't seen that in a long time. And the regular season championship, first time since 2008.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that excitement from this just not being normal.
Sure.
So, that's where I think that excitement comes in for the men's basketball.
Yeah, and I think, like we said before, I think it's a very interesting time, on campus right now with sports. Obviously, and, I would say a little bit of that excitement, too, is coming from the way the football season went.
Oh, yeah.
You have to undergo all of that. And, you saw, like I said, I think we said this a couple episodes ago, but the men's team or the women's team wins one game, and it's like, oh, this is a basketball school.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Because, understandably so, because of the way that season went. It was more than attrition. It was just, almost heartbreak for Tennessee fans. You look at that Florida game where, a Hail Mary to win the game, and then that coaching search was just –
yeah, and
it wasn't fun.
Fans went through it.
Yeah,
fans
they
went
did.
through it, and us media people did too.
Sure,
especially with the coaching search.
Oh man.
But like you said, all that pain. At this point, it was like, okay, we need something to be happy about. We can't be depressed for the next 6 to 8 months waiting on football season and Jeremy Pruitt and his new staff or whatever. But and the basketball teams are giving them that.
Sure.
Lady Vols have, and the men's basketball team have. It's just, the men's basketball team, it's been so long, rather so with the Lady Vols, this is, usually where they are more times than not. So, it's the old saying that consistency sometimes gets boring.
Yeah.
So
look at Nick Saban in Alabama. You see that even from some of those fans. So
it's like, what else do you expect?
Yeah, exactly. But I like that. I like that sort of analogy, of Holly Willick-McBarnes sort of taking the mantle from football and sort of, making the fans happy again.
Yeah.
But thanks for watching, guys. That's going to wrap it up for us today. Make sure to check out the Daily Beacon Sports Twitter, our website. Follow both of us on Twitter for the latest Tennessee Athletics news and updates. So once again, thanks for watching, and this is Tyler Wombles, and that's to Michael Cole, and we'll see you at the next episode.